Bonjour, hello. This is another way for me to hopefully give you some helpful information to help you with your French learning. It's part of the membership program, and thanks very much for being one of the first people to try that out. By the way, if you have any feedback about it, I'm really open to hearing your thoughts and molding it, because it's something that's in progress at the moment, and it'd be useful to hear what you think and look at ways to improve it and add extra ideas, that sort of thing. So what's this that I've got in front of me here? It's a graphic, a chart that was made by Ken Blanchard, who you may not have heard of. He was the 5-Minute Manager author. And this is something that I learned when I was at Tesco, and they were teaching us how to take on board new learning as we went through our roles, our jobs. And I think it's really, really relevant to the process of learning in a language. And so let's apply it to what we're trying to do here, which is constantly improve our French. And I say we because that includes me as much as it does you. I'm maybe a little bit further down my journey than you are, but this has been an endeavour of 30 years of practice, of listening, of focus. And, if I live for another 30, I suspect it'll be an endeavour of the next 30 as well. But to take heart from that, because it is a really interesting and exciting journey, isn't it? But it has its ups and downs, as this graph shows. So let me show you what I mean. So up here on the left here, we have the axis with confidence. And you can see that this graph starts really high up here, nice and high on the confidence scale. And then across the bottom, we have the competence scale, the level of skill. Now, what this theory is that when you come to something new, you don't really know it that well, then you could really say to yourself, well, how hard can it be, really? And I know that was where I was when I first arrived in France, and I couldn't speak French. And I thought, oh, I'll get by on my O-level French. And, I soon found out, actually, that my competence was fairly low, and then my confidence fell. And that's what happens, is that we start out learning something, and it doesn't have to be the whole big topic of French. It could be something small and specific within French. And I think that's the best way to think about this graph, actually. And we are unconsciously incompetent, or i.e. we don't know what we don't know. And that puts us at the forming stage. So full of optimism. It's when you buy a new stationery. It's when you're rolling up your sleeves, ready to, come on, teach me something new. I'm ready. And I'm sure I can learn it quickly and apply it and get full value out of it very quickly. Let me take you an example then of an ER verb. Example. Now, everybody listening to this will know what an ER verb is. It's a verb in French that ends in ER. For example, parler. Now, when you first come across ER verbs, there's actually quite a lot of things that you're going to have to learn. You're going to have to learn what a verb is. You're going to have to learn that French verbs are formed by having stems, and then you add endings to them. There's a number of different things you've got to learn. But at the stage of unconscious incompetence, you might look at a verb like parler or habiter, and you think, oh yeah, I know, I've heard those before. How hard can it be? And so you're feeling fairly competent. But actually, your level of competence is quite low. So we call that unconscious, i.e. you don't know, incompetence at this stage of that learning point. You might not know that, the endings change. You might not know that that A sound, parler, for example, only comes from the ER or the EZ in the present tense. You might want to flourish it in everywhere. So at that stage, you're at this unconscious incompetence level, which is probably quite a happy place to be. Now, the next stage that you'll hit, so that's the forming, the next stage you'll hit is the storming phase. And this is when you become consciously incompetent. And it could be quite an uncomfortable point to be at, really, because this is when you find out, oh, hold on, I've got to find out what a verb is. I need to know what a stem is. What are these endings? Why is there an ending, excuse me, for the plural with ENT, but we don't pronounce the ENT, we just pronounce the E. And you're consciously incompetent and you're thinking, gosh, There's so much to learn, isn't there? But then you chip away at it and you work up that learning curve, and at some point you become consciously competent. And that's when you're saying, okay, this is an ER verb. Okay, if I'm talking in the je parle, so I've taken away the ER, I've added the E back in. If I'm speaking in vous parlez, I'm taking away the ER, I'm adding EZ, and so forth. So you're consciously thinking about that when you're speaking or when you're forming those verbs. And then you're at the norming stage. You know what it is, you understand it at a technical level, but you have to think about it in order to use that new skill. Now, the next stage you come along to is unconscious competence. And this is where we all want to be with everything that we learn. And this is where you don't even think about it. You say, je parle, tu parles, il parle, nous parlons, vous parlez, il parle. You don't think about it. And then you realize you can use it in all sorts of different scenarios with the thousands and thousands or tens of thousands of ER verbs that exist in the French language. And you're not thinking, oh, I had to remove the ER, I had to add the ENT on, or the EZ or the ONS, because you've absolutely got it completely embedded in your mind and you're using it at a level of unconscious competence. And at that moment, you should really celebrate that you've bagged something really powerful there, because you've learned something. You've actually gone through quite a loop there, quite a process. And you've had some high points and low points and perhaps some plateaus, but finally you've bagged it. Now, in my experience, I tend to have found that I get unconsciously competent about a point, and it doesn't matter whether it's an individual point, a whole segment, a whole category of stuff that you've learned in French. Get to that unconscious competent thing, and I think, oh, I'm so money in the supermarket. I've got this nailed. Someone just called me French a minute ago. Wow, I must have got this absolutely nailed. And then something new crops up. And you think, oh, this is interesting. Quite curious about that. And off you go around the loop again. And I think that learning French, learning any language, is a continuous process of going through that. And knowing about this is really useful because you can actually stop and think, where am I? Where am I in that process at the moment? And I think this is the most uncomfortable position to be here, the conscious incompetence, the storming stage, because you've got all of that ahead of you and you've just fallen from here. But actually, you could flip that and you could think, well, actually, this is a really exciting stage to be at. And actually, I've got all of this to learn. And at some point, I'm going to get from here to here. So this is a useful thing to have in your back pocket. And just remember, as you're progressing through your French, that constantly you're going through this loop of forming, storming, norming, and then the ultimate, performing.